hear that.
The mother of the
Yeah.
fallen
So I
capital
said,
police
okay.
officer is
Well,
pleading
I said,
with them
well,
to
it's all right.
change their minds.
I'll
Here's
hang with you
Osado
for a few
Madani.
days, but when I would, but people forget that more black people went to South and Central America and Brazil than
We
came to
hope.
the United
That's what we can
States.
hope
So,
for.
when I go to that part of the world, I'm in. Like, what's that?
Oh yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, they went. I mean, they took slaves from all over the place too. Puerto Rico and South America, Central America, Mexico. They wanted
that's
to
right.
deny that they had African descendants. I'm like, seriously?
Well, but because that's where
Dead by a co-worker at a San Jose,
we went there.
California
We
rail
escaped
yard,
there.
who
Bless
then
our
killed
heart.
himself.
Hmm.
Looking for
His
some,
son Paul was among the victims.
looking for a
Heard there on
little bit more,
KGO
looking for some
TV. He says
relief.
his son
So
was
you know
his
what? I've
best
got
friend.
Pastor
AAA is
Williams, and
predicting
I'm going to let
millions
you all
of us will
go
hit the road and
so I
travel
can.
by air over this Memorial.
Hey, good morning, Pastor
Good
Williams.
morning. Good morning,
Good
Pastor
morning.
Williams.
How are you?
As we continue to emerge
Great.
from the pandemic lockdown.
All right, Santita, I'm going to be paying attention. I sent you an email. I responded to the email,
Okay,
so
we'll
we'll
talk about
talk
that
later
later.
about
All right,
that.
hon.
I'm going to
Perfect.
be recording. Okay.
Okay, great,
Talk to
great.
you
Sounds
later.
good. Sounds good.
Have a
Sounds
great show.
great.
All right,
Yeah.
everybody. Thank
Okay.
you so
Everyone.
much.
You're
Sure
welcome.
enough. Bye.
Thank you. Love you much.
Pastor,
Pastor, how are you
All
today?
right.
couldn't breathe.
I'm well, thank you. How are you today?
I am doing well. Just getting ready to get
Several
out of town
companies and
Good.
groups are
again.
working with the White House to invest
Oh,
in
wow.
Central American
Yeah,
nations
I'm going to go to
as a way of
Tulsa.
helping to ease migration. Here's
Oh,
Victoria
okay.
Dwyer with
Gotcha.
latest on this
Mm-hmm.
story.
And but I'm first going. My niece is graduating from high school. I'm like, wow. I
Oh,
just can't believe that she is taller than me. She just turned 18. I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened here, Lord?
I know these kids they're not waiting for anybody.
No, they will let you know that time waits for no one.
That's right. That's right. That is correct.
So bless her heart. So proud of her. And so,
And I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
This is 8:20 a.m. WCPT.
okay, I'm sorry. Got
And
this.
streaming
Okay, good.
worldwide at
Got
No,
these,
no,
got
you're
these,
okay.
got these. Yep.
We
Trying
are
to do this because
Chicago's
I
Progressive
started
Talk,
getting
where
new
facts matter.
guests at
Now your
in the middle of
WCPT
it, like
820 Chicago
2:53.
traffic
I said,
updates.
oh really? So I got to rework
On
the
the
Oh,
show.
boy.
Yeah.
looking at major delays.
Well,
There's
I'm
crash
trying to
at
get
Addison in the
people
left
from Tulsa
lane, and
involved in the
traffic is
show today.
packed. Then Diversey to
Um,
Division.
Gotcha.
Pull over garbage truck
because
as
they've
three
got
right lanes blocked along with the
they
exit to
canceled one of the
Division.
big events
46 minutes, so here to
because of death
downtown,
threats, and
37
I'm
from
like, honey, you all
Montrose.
just need to go and
Yeah.
have your event
The
now.
express lanes, they'll save
Enough
a
this.
mile.
Right.
They've done
About
everything they could
20
do to you.
minutes downtown to O'Hare.
They bombed you
Yeah.
out.
Hello.
So come on,
Hello.
20 minutes, 355
come on,
Lakeshore
just
Drive.
go on and
By
have your
18
event and
minutes,
be
90
done with
minutes to
it.
downtown. Travel times are up.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
just a lot going on there, right?
McHenry
So,
31 still
but
closed.
we are going, and let me
120
say hello to
Keene
Carol. How you
from
doing, Linear
Wolfboro
Bob? How
by
you doing
last
out there
night.
in San
I'm
Jose?
Jim
Sending you much
Alamonte.
love. Daryl, how
So,
you doing?
how can I promote my
Columbus,
new
Ohio.
curbside
Love
pickup
it, love it,
service?
love
It's
you,
possible
love you,
with
Lakiba,
Staples Connect. I
Samantha,
need custom
Carol,
floor
Linear
decals
Bob.
that'll get noticed,
Thank you so
not
much. We
just
will be
walked
talking
on.
about Tulsa
Also
today.
possible,
It's
Staples
interesting.
Connect can help your
I've got
business
Pastor
grow
Tisha
with
Williams
custom
with
printed
me.
sales and marketing
Pastor
materials.
Tisha Dixon.
And now
Good
get
morning.
50% off signs, posters, and decals when you spend $75
It's very,
or
very
more.
difficult
Explore what's
to
new at your local
find.
Staples store or
They
staplesconnect.com.
try to
Staples
obscure the
Connect, the
fact that this was
working
the
and learning
first
store. Ends 5/29.
bombing
Visit
of an American city
staples.com/signage for details.
Mm-hmm.
on Americans.
Republicans have been trying to cancel
an
the minimum
aerial,
wage
the
ever since it
first
was
aerial
enacted in the
bombardment
1930s. They've
of an
successfully canceled
American,
any increases
of an
in
American
1 minute.
soil
Republicans have gone out of their
was
way to try
Tulsa,
and cancel Americans'
trying
health
to
care.
find
Mm-hmm.
it.
Jeremiah against
Has
Obamacare,
becomes
they took
more, has
that all the way
become
to the
more and
Supreme
more
Court
difficult.
twice. Why isn't that being referred to as
Yeah.
cancel?
More and
Yeah.
more and more
Tom
and more
Hartman
difficult.
radio
It's
program.
like,
Weekdays
okay,
11 a.m. to
you all
2 p.m.
really
on
keep trying to
WCPT
play
820,
this
where
game.
facts matter.
So just make sure.
Dwayne's CPA went MIA.
Deep.
To keep his
Yeah.
and his sanity, he needs to find a
30.
Deep. Thank you. So we're coming in.
Have you ever heard of fungible good?
Indeed can help him hire the people he needs.
I need Indeed.
Indeed, you do. When you sponsor a job, you
All right,
immediately
all
get
right.
your short list of
It
quality
is storming
candidates whose
outside.
resumes on
That is what
Indeed
you're
match your
hearing.
job
So-
criteria.
15.
All right, thank you.
Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job.
10.
Terms and conditions apply.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT
5.
820, where this is the Santita Jackson Show.
Unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Friday, May 28th, 2021, Memorial Day weekend. Wow, the summer is just about here, everybody. You can wear your white. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, my home station in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet my morning stars, Linear Bob out there in San Jose, Carol Crowley, and let me see, Daryl and Makiba and Samantha and Jewel and Will and Nina. How you doing, Nina? Sending you much love. Miss Wanda down in North Carolina. Send my love to my beloved Mr. Corey, Linda and Carol and Andre. So many of you continue to like and share, like and share, like and share. And please go over to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and please like and subscribe. Let's like and share, like and share. I need you to help us to continue to spread the word about the show. And we've been growing thanks to you. We're going to be talking about Tulsa today. Tulsa, it's very, very important. It's the 100th anniversary of the bombing, of the massacre of Tulsa. This was probably the wealthiest black neighborhood, community, in the United States. And it was destroyed by the white neighbors that they had in Tulsa. As many as 10,000 white Americans descended upon Tulsa, burning, killing people. And it was the first aerial bombardment on American soil in our history. It's becoming increasingly difficult to find that. I'm so glad that's why my place has become like a paper palace, because you find these stories and you have to hold them, because no one really wants to cop to the fact that our military planes, with the blessings of the people who govern us, took those planes up into the sky in Tulsa, and they dropped bombs on our people, on American people. And the survivors remember the planes overhead. They remember the bombings. Let us not forget that. So we got to talk about that today. We want to lay it out for you. And of course, it's Memorial Day weekend. How many of you know that Memorial Day was created by African Americans? Oh, yes. At the end of the Civil War, it was found that African Americans in the South found that white Union soldiers had been dumped in graves contemptuously, without honor. So they dug up the graves and they buried them properly. And that's how you started Memorial Day. And more than 10,000 African Americans marched around and gave them a proper ceremony. That's how you started Memorial Day. The origins of Memorial Day are in the African American community, honoring soldiers, white and black. Think about that, everybody. So let's get right to it. I like to always drop a little history on you so that we can understand where we are, because so many people have contributed to this American project, and we need to know that. Critical race theory, just tell the truth. Everybody's got a piece of this wonderful American journey. So let's get to it, everybody. Okay, Chicago, it's raining outside. Oh my gosh, 52 degrees. Boy, has it cooled off. It'll warm up again. Lord willing. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 63 degrees, partly cloudy. Yesterday, the Dow closed up 141 points, the NASDAQ closed down a point, and the S&P 500 closed up 4. The NBA playoffs are in full effect. Guess what? The Bucks 113, the Heat 84. The Lakers 109, the Suns 95. And the Nuggets 120 and the Trailblazers 115. The Royals will be playing the Twins today. White Sox 5 won over the Orioles, and they'll be playing them once again. And the Cubs will be playing the Cincinnati Reds. Love it, love it, love it. For everybody, if you're traveling, remember this is going to be a really heavily traveled day. They're expected to make a comeback with American travel. So if you're traveling, everybody, please, please, please be careful. We're going to see 60% more people traveling on this Memorial Day weekend compared to last year. Please wear your masks, be careful, and be patient, particularly with those who are working at the airport. They're really trying to get readjusted, and we need to show them our love, everybody. All right, what do we have in these headlines? Senate Republicans are stalling on a vote to create a commission to investigate the January 6th Capitol riots. Leading the pushback, of course, is Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who's made the unusual move of asking wavering senators to support filibustering the bill as a personal favor to him. Wow. Some hopeful pandemic news to send you off on the weekend, everybody. The CDC is predicting that COVID-19 cases will fall over the next 4 weeks, thanks to widespread vaccination efforts. Those efforts will continue over the Memorial Day weekend in places like New York City, all over the country, because a lot of people are getting a lot of inducements. Mourners gathered yesterday in San Jose to honor the 9 victims of Wednesday's shooting at the Valley Transportation Authority rail yard. It's so sad, everybody. Authorities are releasing more information about the gunman, identified as Sam Cassidy. Law enforcement haven't found any written evidence of a motive, but Santa Clara County Sheriff Lori Smith said he was highly disgruntled regarding his job. Wow. And so he killed everybody. It's just unbelievable, everybody. Motor City Racing, I think we're coming back, everybody. Indy 500, this great Memorial Day weekend event, is sold out. 135,000 fans will be in the stands. What do you think about that? Well, guess what? Things are heating up between the United States and China. As America is calling for a focus on COVID origins, China has said, well, we want you to open up your biological operations as well. I think it's going to get a little contentious. What do you think, everybody? Well, despite protests, it seems that Rahm Emanuel, the former mayor of Chicago, has been offered the ambassadorship to Japan. So what do you think about that? Call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. I'll take your calls about that too. Do you think that he should be offered this prestigious ambassadorship? Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti has been offered the ambassadorship to India. Wow. And former U.S. Undersecretary of State Nicholas Burns has been offered the job as Biden's envoy to China. Rich nations make enough vaccine for the world. They could make enough with just $25 billion, everybody. Wow, wow, wow. Let's get to some good news from the anointed Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton, New York. They're about to have a massive influx of people because, of course, they are a beach community. Oh, be careful. Be careful, my sister.
Oh yeah, we're working on it.
Oh my gosh.
This weekend is about to be a major surge, I believe. So we'll see.
Well, let me ask you this before we get into your message for today, just very quickly. Have you all been told, is there anything that residents, year-round residents of your community have been asked to do to protect yourselves? Because we're not out of the pandemic yet.
We're not, and that's my fear. And no, residents have not been asked to do anything other than to do what we've always been doing, is to wash our hands, stay 6 feet apart. But, I was out and about yesterday, and I started to see some of the relaxing of the mask wearing. And all I could say to myself was, it begins. It begins. And what was interesting is I saw it from the staff of the stores that I went into as opposed to the consumers. So I think that was more alarming for me than anything. Yeah. So it's starting to get relaxed, which is my concern. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we've been told up until now that that these shots did not stop the spread and didn't stop you from getting COVID-19. And in fact, we're seeing breakthrough viruses happen, not infrequently. So,
Correct.
so we'll have to see. But in the meantime, they're telling you, even if you have had these shots, please wear your masks. So
Yes.
just be careful, everybody. Just be very, very careful
Be careful.
because the news is evolving. Well, you know what? I'm sitting
Yeah,
back.
and think of your fellow man.
Think of your okay and woman.
Think of your fellow man
The
and
children.
woman. Yeah.
Children.
Mhm.
Just think of everybody.
Yes. Yes. Because just because you have the virus doesn't mean you can't give it to someone else, and that's the concern.
And nobody is
Mhm.
completely protected. Nobody is.
Correct.
There's nobody
Correct.
is. Whew. Well, what's the good news?
Well, it kind of every time we have a conversation, it goes right in line with what I'm talking about. When we're talking about these masks, I want to talk today just for a moment about if you see something, say something. If you see something, say something is a national campaign that raises public awareness of the indicators of terrorism and terrorism-related crime, as well as the importance of reporting suspicious activity to state and local law enforcement. I'm thinking about the Tulsa incident and wish that this was implemented at that time. Perhaps if someone saw something, they could have said something to avert that tragedy. But as we consider, I think about another example when we go back 50 days as we just celebrated Pentecost to Mary at the empty tomb of Jesus. It could have easily seemed like an act of terror. And what she's confronted with is really a case of a missing Christ. And what looked like an act of terror was really one of transformation. And yet the directive was from Jesus is the same. He said, I have seen the Lord. She says, I have seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her when she saw him. In other words, Mary, now that you've seen something, I need you to say something. Santita, I'm inspired by Mary this morning because here we find the power of a woman's testimony. And I'm not leaving the brethren out today, but there's something powerful about a woman's testimony and preachment. Because the reality is that we testify every day. Can I prove it to you? When a woman starts a conversation with, girl, she's about to testify. If a woman starts a conversation with, first of all, not only is she about to testify, she's about to come with receipts, charts, graphs, and everything to prove her point. If a woman starts a conversation with listen, it's almost like E.F. Hutton. She is about to testify. But I want to encourage you today that a powerful testimony can bring you back to life. I'm reminded of Steve Harvey in his Kings of Comedy set. He talks about a woman named Mother Odell. And when he was a child, Mother Odell's testimony was filled with colorful stories and colorful language and TV theme songs that would run together on her. But the thing I remember most about what Steve said was they couldn't wait for Sister Odell to testify. He was sleeping in church, but when Sister Odell got up, he woke up. I want to encourage you today that that's the power of a testimony. That's what it ought to do. If you see something, you ought to say something. Testimonies ought to bring revival, new life, the hope to go on. Don't you know that your story, your testimony has the power to bring someone back to life today? So can I get a witness this morning? What's your story? What's your testimony? What have you seen and you're prepared to say something about it? Don't you know today that testimonies like Jesus have restoration, revival, and resurrection power? When Mary saw something, she said something. But there's also another woman, the woman who saw Jesus at the well, not knowing who he was. But when his true identity was revealed, she saw Jesus for who he really was, and she said something to everybody. She dropped her water pot, ran into town, and said, come see a man who told me everything about myself. And one testimony turned into a 2-day revival. So I simply want to suggest this morning that when you see something, say something. Mary saw Jesus and she said something. When you see poverty, say something. When you see a need for healing, you ought to say something. If you see blessings, you ought to say something. If you see provision, say something. When you see miracles, say something. When you see someone in need, say something. If you see someone in distress, say something. When you see injustice, say something. If you see a crack in a glass ceiling, say something. And if you see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, say something and encourage someone else. I just want to say this morning, the good news is this. You have a power in your story and in your testimony. And when you see something, you ought to say something.
Amen to that. I love that. I love that. I love that. But you know what? Before you go, that's why I want to talk about Tulsa today. Because
Sure.
we have three living survivors: 170 years of age, 105, and 100. Clearly, the 100-year-old was a newborn. And I think we have got to say something about this history. Far too few of us, Pastor, do not know what happened there. Far too few of us far too few of us know that this was the first aerial assault using our military weapons on American soil. I mean, when you think
Yeah.
about that, and when this woman went to Congress, she said, I am seeking justice. She's the oldest survivor. She was just 7 years of age at the time. She said, I am seeking justice. All of these years later, that is all that she wants. She said, I want justice. And so can you just give me a little something about not removing the ancient landmarks? Why that's so important? Because listening to Mrs. Viola Fletcher's testimony, she said, God has kept her mind clear and her tongue sharp. And she said, I am seeking justice. Why is that important?
It's important because, as the West African proverb says, until the lion tells the story, the hunter will always be the hero. We have to tell our stories. One of the things that we as people of color have always done and done well and have relied on is our oral history. When we do not tell our stories die with us. And that's why I'm such an advocate of people telling their stories. As I said, this history has resurrection power. This woman's testimony, this survivor's testimony will not only provide for laws and regulations and change, but what it'll do is it'll possibly uplift another group of people that will be empowered and inspired to create another Tulsa, to create another financially free wealth movement among people of color and those who are marginalized and outsiders. And I think that's the fear. See, when stories are told, people are inspired. And when people are inspired, they're moved to action. And that's the fear. And that's why, they don't want our stories to be told, but we have to. And so that's the importance of this. I'm grateful that she's still alive, and perhaps she has been preserved so that she might tell this story, so that we might know what happened. We're the lions, and we deserve to be the heroes of our own story.
Amen to that, because trying to find Pastor Williams, trying to find Scott Pelley, everybody. This comes from 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes went to Tulsa to investigate the charges that the military planes were used. Excuse me. Let me be very specific, to drop bombs on Tulsa. 10,000. It wasn't a white mob. It was 10,000 people who came to Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. The Gap Band. Thank you very much. They're named after that. Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. They went to that community to destroy it. Stay right there, Pastor. Let me speak with you, Pam. What's on your mind, Pam?
Good morning, Santita. How are you?
It's great hearing your voice always.
Thank you. Good hearing yours. First, Santita, let me just do this really quickly. Last time we spoke, I talked about not making excuses for crime, and then the call dropped. But my next statement was going to be that you offered the exact explanation for why crime and poverty exist. So that was the statement that was left off, and someone called me out on that because they thought I had changed my position on that issue. Okay. And I just wanted to tell them, no, I make no excuses for crime. There are only the explanations. And all you have to do is look through history to understand where we are with that issue, poverty and crime. So I wanted to clear that up. Santita, thank you for the Tulsa, Oklahoma.
And that doesn't excuse wealth and crime, because no one has raped and killed more than people on Wall Street. But let's continue. What were you going to say about
Sure, no,
Tulsa?
correct,
So let's
correct.
making
Was
the
Tulsa.
correlation between crime and poverty is not true. You got more
Exactly,
unconvicted felons
exactly.
who are walking around doing big business in the United States and the world today. So let's establish
Sure,
that. But
but
what you were saying about Tulsa,
absolutely.
I just had to say that.
Absolutely. That's okay. I appreciate it. I had the beautiful opportunity to meet two of the survivors. And as you know, Santita, I think Mr. John Rogers Jr. from a mutual
Ariel Capital
Ariel
Management.
is right. His I think his family owned at the time the Stratford, which was destroyed.
His
In
mother's
that, is that correct?
his mother's parents. Yes, Jewel Stratford
Okay, great.
LaFontaine, who made history, who went on to make history herself. You know, she was a deputy solicitor general under President Nixon.
Exactly.
So brilliant.
So there's some history there.
Yeah.
No, exactly. So I wanted to just let people know that the survivors were attempting to get reparations from this government, and they were well represented by then attorney Professor Ogletree, Charles Ogletree. They came to Chicago, and so my concern, and at the time there was a documentary or movie which was called Before They Die. And I'm not sure. I think that would be helpful to the audience before they die. And so, Santita, we have to have a reckoning about this. I mean, this was the U.S. that did have military force come against this town.
They destroyed
now,
it.
how are we going to deal with that in a fair, just, equitable way? We can't even discuss it in history books.
Well, no, we're discussing it here.
We can't even. It's American history.
But you know what? We have to start writing our books and publishing them. See, we didn't realize what a jewel we had in John Johnson's Johnson Publishing Company, because he published before the Mayflower. He published Ebony and Jet. He published Freedom Ways magazine. Stop asking other people. They should be fair and use and engage in a mutually reciprocal relationship with people who are their margin of profit, and that's typically Black people. That having been said, we need to create our own platforms. They might not be as fancy, but create your own platform and tell your own story. That's why we're here today.
Well, no, that's
you know what? I'm not going to wait on another radio
it gets
station.
the job done.
That's right, but I'm just saying I'm not going to wait on another radio station or on another host. I'm not going to wait on anybody to tell my story. We have to do it ourselves. And then you leave.
And my last quick statement.
I got 30 seconds, and then to you.
It's not a problem. Last statement, Rahm Emanuel, no. I sent an email to Senators Durbin and Senator Duckworth saying no. These are some of the indignities that Black people have to face. To have Rahm Emanuel do what he did to Chicago, for me, assist in the cover-up of Laquan McDonald.
15.
To withdraw all the necessary resources
10.
from our communities. Close our schools. Close the community
5.
centers. And to have Biden consider this, it's a no-go. I will continue to call.
Absolutely.
I will continue to express my outrage.
All right, Pam. Stay right there, everybody. We're going to talk about Tulsa. I want to hear what your thoughts are. Do they deserve reparations? Do you really know the story? Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Happy Memorial Day, everybody. Okay. All right, Pam, I'm sorry, honey. When I say 30 seconds, I mean I got to get out. Thank you, sweetie, okay? Pastor Williams?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you for being with us today. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Can I just add something to what we're talking about in story? You know, we have for far too long believed a revisionist history. And I want people to know that our story as people of color didn't start in slavery. We descend from royalty. We are an army. We descend from an army of kings and queens, and we can no longer afford to fall for revisionist history. I'm so grateful you said that we have to write our own books, and we have to tell our stories. We have to let other people know what we descend from. It didn't begin in slavery. We are part of a royal army. And unfortunately, we have millions of Black and brown bodies who are vulnerable to discrimination, death, sideline destinies, all because we don't know how great we are, all because we don't understand the richness of our heritage and our story.
We have Dr. Malvo.
To be on guard and not continue to fall for alternative facts and twisted truth. And more than anything, as an army, we have to stay in formation. We have to stay in formation against police terrorism, redlining, residential segregation, mass incarceration, all of these things. And it's time for us to know our histories, know our stories, stand up and continue to work together. And I'm praying that the work that we're doing to advocate for this, for Tulsa and reparations will start in a move in the right direction. But we are the key. And now more than ever, what I've been saying, even in this season, we're the keepers of the story of 2020. We're the keepers of the story of this pandemic. We are writing the playbook and the history book for what it means to live and thrive. And for me, pastor, preach, lead in a season like this. And so now more than ever,
we have Attorney Hoffler.
And be the keepers of our story.
Well, I'm completely with you. And you know what? We need to tell the story of those who were enslaved. The thing is, you don't have to put a crown on my head. God already did that for me. I'm good.
Right.
The thing is, our ancestors who endured slavery, who survived it, they need honor. And we need to stop being ashamed of the people who wore these rags, who absorbed all of this insult, the rape, the beatings, the dehumanization. We need to lift them up. Now, my friends who are Irish, lift up the people who were in unimaginable poverty in Ireland. That's why they're at the bottom of the United Kingdom system. They're at the bottom.
Yeah.
And I want us to honor our people. I'm like, honey, wait. Because I don't know why you would sell a king or a queen and send me over here, but okay, I'll buy that. That having been said, my great grandmama who couldn't read or write was a queen. How about that?
You better believe it.
Come on now.
You better believe it. And for us to have the resiliency and the strength to survive something as tumultuous as a Middle Passage, what you have here is the DNA of the best of the best. So we've got to know that we will survive. We're strong.
That's right.
We are strong and we are resilient. And that's the story that needs to.
And we have Mr. McKee.
And let us honor that. Let us honor
30
that.
seconds.
You just stay right here. Stay right here, Pastor. But I'm going to bring up everybody else, but I want you to stay here. Because you don't know. Sure. You know me. I kind of go with it. How about that?
I appreciate it.
Yes, I do.
I'm happy to.
Yes, I do. Whew. Okay, everybody make sure you're in a quiet place and no ruffling of the papers or moving anything around because it is amplified.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, Memorial Day edition of the Santita Jackson Show. Of course, this is the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa massacre, of the Tulsa bombing. The first aerial assault on American soil took place 100 years ago, May 29th through June 1st. May 31st through June 1st. It was horrific. 10,000 whites descended upon the Black citizens of Tulsa, Greenwood, Archer, and Pine, the most prosperous Black community in the country. And there were several of them, and they were all systematically destroyed. We need to talk about that today. I still see Black men being shot, Black bodies lying in the street. I still smell smoke and see fire. I still see Black businesses being burned. I still hear airplanes flying overhead. I hear the screams. That is from Mrs. Viola Fletcher, 7 years old at that time. She's 107 years of age. 2 weeks ago, she went to testify before Congress. They're looking for reparations. She said, I am seeking justice. So what do you think about that today, everybody? 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278, as we are in the Memorial Day weekend, which was invented by Black people who were newly freed from slavery. saw that white Union soldiers had been dumped in these mass graves without honor. They dug them up, buried them properly, and created Decoration Day, created a Memorial Day. Thousands of us marched and honored them. Remember that. That is where Memorial Day came from, everybody. So we've got a tremendous panel with us today. We're going to have a lot of people who are going to be weighing in the next hour. We're going to have Bishop Carlton Pearson. Yes, that Bishop Pearson, a native of Tulsa. And we're going to have Teresa Fletcher, whose brother, Terrence Fletcher, was killed. We got, it seems to be Crutcher. There were just so much is happening, and the young man who is the pastor of the historic Vernon AME Church. That church, the basement, is one of the few structures that survived the bombing and the massacre. He is creating a prayer wall for racial reconciliation, much like the wall that we see over in Jerusalem. So we've got a lot to talk about today, but I've got Attorney C.K. Hoffler, president of the National Bar Association. So many of her lawyers are working on these reparations cases. She's also the chair of Rainbow Push. Dr. Julianne Malveaux, brilliant economist. And she's also the president emeritus of the Bennett College for Women. Dwight McKee, brilliant social scientist. We're so glad to have all of you here today. And of course, Reverend Tesha Williams said she wanted to stay on because I think everybody's very, very full about Tulsa. And I'm glad that we're talking about it because we spent too little time talking about it. Dwight McKee, why don't you set the table for us? What is the significance of Tulsa today?
Well, good morning, you all. Tulsa was a human tragedy, and it was really almost lost in the archives of American history because it was so dreadful. Nobody wanted to take ownership for it. But as we all know, it was when there was a tremendous riot from about 10,000 white citizens under the pretext that a black guy had raped a white woman. But they used it as a pretext because blacks had become so prosperous and so independent that they had become a competition to white interest in white business. And so they used that not only to burn the city down, but to steal the property and take the land of the residential blacks in the area. The Gap Band made a song about it. They're named after that. The song say, "You dropped a bomb on me," because it was the first time that America had been bombed. It was bombed from the inside out. Airplanes were only about 10 years old. And by that time, the first real use of that in terms of warfare after World War I, domestically was dropping bombs on us. It's interesting because what it says is that white people after the Civil War wasn't interested in integration or segregation. They were interested in subjugation. Their role was and goal was to subject us to their wills and their whims. The other part of that, Santita, is the reason that it's so tricky and sticky on the reparations issue is because this was fairly common back then. They wouldn't be the only city that would be obligated for reparations. They did the same thing. There were riots, the same kind of riots in Springfield, Illinois, in Chicago, Illinois, 2 years later, and St. Louis, Missouri, and in Boston had those kind of riots. New York had those kind of riots. It was kind of when these guys stormed the Capitol at the beginning of the year for the inauguration. That was their conventional reaction to things that they didn't like and don't believe in. Mob rule has always been, in some situations, the order of the day. And if they do a real investigation, they will end up having to pay a lot of cities for this. And again, it explains why these 100 years later, it's so hard for us to catch up.
Well, you know.
I said the other day that these people take the oxygen out the room and then blame us for suffocating.
Well, you know, Dr. Julianne Malveaux what they do is trying to find the statements that this was the first aerial bombardment, the first aerial assault on on American soil, and that it was Americans who did it. Is becoming increasingly difficult. They're trying to wipe that history out, but that is what happened. Scott Pelley from 60 Minutes, they went and investigated that and found that to be true. Why is Tulsa significant, Dr. Malveaux?
Well, Tulsa is the worst of many, many situations. We began to see racial economic violence as soon as Reconstruction was over. The first lynching that Ida B. Wells documented was an lynching that happened out of nothing more than economic envy. And if you talk about lynching, this massacre, this is about economic envy. In Tulsa, when the governor appointed a commission to find out, and I'm laughing because it's just absurd to me. It's not funny, but just absurd. To find out what was wrong and why there was a Tulsa massacre. We should never call it a riot. It was a massacre. But when the official document, Santita, said too many N-words, and it wasn't N-word. Too many of us had too much money. That was the source of it. So go back for a minute to Ida B. Wells and her friend Tommy Moss, who started a grocery store called the People's Grocery in 1892. Well, a white man who lived down the street, had a grocery store down the street, couldn't stand that black people had started their own store. He picked a fight with the man over marbles, and the next thing you know, Tommy Moss and his three friends were lynched. Now, not only were they lynched, but then this white man, and my name blocks, his name blocks, I have it in my forthcoming book, but when he, after everything had occurred, he got their asses for 8 cents on the dollar. That's economic envy. So fast forward so we can go to Wilmington, North Carolina. But let's fast forward to Tulsa. Dr. Olivia Hooker, who was one of the survivors, she died at 103 a couple of years ago. I was privileged to be one of the eulogists at her service. She, Dr. Hooker said the white people have been stockpiling guns for a long time. This was not about Dick Rowland, who was the young man's name, raping Sarah Page. This was about economic envy. We had our own library. We had our own hospital. The first person to own an automobile in Tulsa was a black man. And he was so brilliant that not only did he buy an automobile, but he set up an auto repair shop. Because when he learned how to fix his car, he realized he could do it for others. We had a family that had a 750-person theater. That's economic envy. Black folks didn't have to go to white folks for anything but banking, and they really didn't even have to do that. So basically, they were ready for anything to happen. And what happened was nonsense. Dick Rowland did not rape Sarah Page. Dick Rowland bumped into Sarah Page. A white man observed it and ran, you know how they say, run tell that, and ran and told that Dick had raped Sarah. The newspaper had a headline. We can't find them anymore, but they reported on to lynch a Negro tonight. And again, this was not about rape. The most lynchings were not. This was not about sexual contact. This was about economic envy. And so thousands descended on the black community, Greenwood. They went in individual homes. They vandalized them. Dr. Hooker remembered vividly, and it was so sad to have a woman that age remember. Of all the things she remembered that burning one of her dolls and breaking her mother's Caruso records. This is about economic envy. And so I keep saying that because people don't want to deal with the totality of it. Why are they trying to basically erase this from history? Because it makes them look bad. Because the oppressor cannot stand to look bad. Because as long as you have this thing being whitewashed, you have plausible deniability. But thanks to that 107-year-old sister, Dr. Hooker and so many others, they can deny all they want. We know that it happened, and now that they're going to dig back up the bodies for the mass graves, we'll know what happened. But again, let's understand this is a tragedy of American racism. And while it makes a case for Tulsa to have reparations and for so many other cities, it also makes a case for Black America to have reparations. Why? When you lynch me, you lynch you. In other words, Black people have operated under the structure of fear for a very long time. Santita, we all know the story of Mary Turner, which is why so many of our sisters are both bold, but so many are also quiet. Mary Turner was a 19-year-old, who was, her husband was lynched. She went down to the courthouse and said, someone's going to have to pay for that. They said that she was impertinent and mouthy. Mouthy. How many of us have been called mouthy? The next thing you know, she was hanging by her ankles. They set her dress on fire. They slit her belly open. She was 19 and pregnant. They stomped her fetus. How many Black women's mamas have said to them, lower your voice. Don't start that. When mine said, okay, start it, but I'm not bailing you out of jail. That's another story. But in any case, how many of us have been told to hide our light? Because they were influenced. They'd rather see us alive and timid than dead and bone. And that was Mary Turner's legacy. So Tulsa set a tone, and it wasn't the first one. Remember the Red Summer of 1919. Tulsa was 1921. In the Red Summer, there were over 40 racially based incidents. Black people pulled off streetcars in Washington, D.C. just for being Black.
Well, but
once you do this, and it's okay, once you say it's okay, then it sets a tone for it to happen again and again and again.
And that's why the story of Black prospering and Black prosperity after the Civil War has to be told, because this was the response to that. Destroying our communities, killing people. That is what happened. So Attorney C.K. Hoffler, they're calling for reparations. These are cases that you handle. Do you think that, what would that look like? I mean, because now the people, Greenwood, Archer, and Pine is now, it's been gentrified. Black people don't even own it anymore. Do they not have a right to return?
Well, good morning, Santita. I think that's, let me take the legal question first, and then I'll talk about whether they have the right to return. So the reparations cases, we filed a big lawsuit, I want to say about 15 years ago or more. This is when Johnny Cochran was alive, so maybe almost 20 years ago. Johnny Cochran, Willie Gary, Charles Ogletree led a lot of the drafting, Professor Charles Ogletree. And our firm was involved, and a lot of the titans in the legal industry were part of this case. And I was involved too. I signed on to it as well as a number of attorneys, maybe about 20 or 25 attorneys. And we used Oklahoma as a test case because of the massacre. It was, if we felt ever there were a time for reparations, it would be, or a case that you would test for reparations, it would be Oklahoma, because this tragedy is so pronounced and so poignant, and a clear example of, because when you file a lawsuit, you have to be fact specific, you can't be general. And so there was a lot of information. Like many of the other reparations type litigation that preceded it, ultimately the case was dismissed for statutory grounds, jurisdictional issues, but it was drafted and crafted very masterfully. So what the lawyers have done this time around was to take, the opinions, take the information that was learned from that litigation, and retool, retweak it. And so I do think ultimately the legal challenges will continue until there is something that happens and there's some victory. So I do feel that it may take a long time, for all the same reasons why it took a long time to get the passage of the Voting Rights Act so that Black folks could vote, for all the same reasons why it took a long time to get the passage of the Civil Rights legislation so that there could be civil rights for us in this country and for Black and brown people in particular, that your dad and Dr. King and, late Congressman Lewis and so many others fought for. So I think it's going to continue, Santita. Now, if I saw video footage about, because we had a town hall meeting, as I mentioned, about a month ago on the Tulsa massacre, on the massacre there, and in the footage they showed us what it looked like before and what it looks like now. And you're absolutely right. Very, very few African Americans are in that space. It was a block or two. It was just like an area. And the other thing that's important is one of the reasons why people are only now recognizing that this happened is because even the Black community there didn't talk about it for so long. It was so painful. So for a period of time, we're to understand that people just didn't talk about it because literally they lost so much that it was just too painful. It would be like today us experiencing slavery right now in this moment, or in every single community on every block in this country, a George Floyd being killed. The PTSD, the shock, the emotional trauma was so significant that they stopped talking about it. And the fact that there were no reparations, not literal reparations how we look at it now, but there was no address. This was not addressed at all by the authorities. And the sense of betrayal, the sense of loss, the sense of fear that our community experienced there was so tremendous that people just initially acted like, they picked up the pieces and sort of like, not that it didn't happen, but it wasn't chronicled that way immediately after. Then the stories were passed down because they didn't want people to talk about it. People were in fear of their lives. Imagine after this happened, because everything was cleaned out, it was racially driven, it was racially motivated by hatred, financial envy, all of those things. And so people were in fear of it happening again. So as a result, they just sort of, let's not talk about it. Don't reflect on it. And a lot of the information may have been lost, but it was never erased. So the significance of those brave, extraordinary heroes who do remember something, who are still alive, 107 and 100, we have got to preserve. They have given and poured into and given as much information as they have, and we've got to preserve their legacy because they're the only people that can really, really speak to what actually happened. And there were a couple more over the years that spoke to that. But we should all recognize the trauma of this for that community that of course, still exists. So, yes, there should be reparations, but I doubt it will be that they will go back into that community because it's very different now. But there are many other ways that there can be reparations, and maybe part of the community, part of that area. It wasn't like miles and miles and miles. It was a very tight-knit area that was exceptionally well. It would be like having a, Fifth Avenue, like in New York, like that area in New York, or Worth Avenue, like which is in Palm Beach, and it's just one avenue, or someplace like that. Like they have those communities in every major city, in the middle of the city, and it was just phenomenal and so prominent. And every time, as we understood the narrative to be, every time a lot of white folks walked by, they would even want to spit, and just, the hatred and the racial animus was so pronounced that it was, the narrative is just a matter of time.
Sure. Well, and I think that's why I agree with you, Dr. Melvo, and everyone here. I don't call it a riot. A riot is like hand-to-hand combat. This was a bombing. This was a massacre. You had 10,000 people who descended on this community and killed people, and they destroyed their homes. They destroyed the community. That's what they did. This was not a riot. This was that first aerial assault on American soil. That's what this was, using military planes. And the people who governed us gave these men permission to get up in these planes and drop these bombs on everybody. So you know what? I only have everything kind of changed overnight because I have some more Tulsans who are going to be coming on with us in the next hour. So I'm going to get some closing thoughts from my panel here. But you all are absolutely wonderful. And I literally have a minute apiece for each of you. Pastor Tisha Williams, 1 minute.
Yes, I just want to just reiterate how important it is to share and to tell our stories, to be the keeper of the story, so that our history will cannot be continue to be revised, and that generations behind us will not continue to fall for revisionist histories. And as a pastor, one of the things that is super important to me is to always have an element of history in my sermons, so that years from now, 100 years from now, people will know what was happening in the world because I told the story. Thank you, Santita, as always.
No, thank you for telling the story. Dr. Malveaux.
I agree with the pastor completely. We have to keep telling the story, but even more than that, we have to understand how corrosive racism and economic envy are. They still exist. If you can dehumanize the people, you can do anything to them that you want to. The fact is that after enslavement, we thrived. And I don't mean thrived as in thrive, but we went from having $1 for every 36 white dollars to $1 for every 16 white dollars. We cut the wealth gap in half in like a 30-year period post-enslavement. Now we haven't cut it in half since then. And what does that mean? People are deliberately preventing us from accumulating because of economic envy. Tulsa is the best example we have, but not the only one.
1 minute. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, where do we go from here?
It's just important to make sure that we continue to preserve the record. Always. And I agree with what everyone else has said. And just remember that legal challenges, when they're ultimately successful, sometimes it's not the first round, the second round, the third round, but the key is having the tenacity to continue. And I believe that now, in terms of legal challenges that have been done in the past and that will continue, will ultimately be successful. But we have to keep fighting. We have to make sure that we have external pressure, meaning the communities outside of Tulsa, to say, this isn't right, there needs to be reparations, let's do something for this community.
And tell the story. Dwight McKee, 1 minute.
Well, one of the reasons it was so lopsided is because they made them pass laws after construction or reconstruction that we would be disarmed. So the white people had guns and we didn't. And so they just were able to run shipshod over the black community. As nonviolent as we are, I think one of the things that we have to understand is that these guys are subject to go in that direction again. If Washington demonstrated anything, it is their propensity to take the law in their own hands and to riot. And so I'm not trying to make any suggestions, but I'm saying be vigilant and consider these things as we pass our laws and support these laws.
Amen, everybody. So we're going to be we're telling the story of Tulsa today. We're telling the story of Tulsa on this Memorial Day weekend. Many of you don't even know that Memorial Day was a holiday created by African Americans to honor the Union soldiers, the white Union soldiers who've been dumped in mass graves. They said, no, that's not right. They dug them up and gave them individual graves and gave them a proper burial. That is where we are. And this 100th anniversary of the Tulsa massacre, the Tulsa bombing, everybody. We're going to have Bishop Carlton Pearson and Reverend Robert Turner, who has stood in the middle of the street of Tulsa with a megaphone for several years, every Wednesday, saying, I want you to come by here and make it right. Let's talk about Tulsa, the Tulsa massacre, the Tulsa bombing. When we make this right, everybody, we can heal our land. Back in just a minute on the Santita Jackson Show. You guys, I'm going to have to let you all go. I plan to keep you, but Pastor Bishop Pearson has brought 2 or 3 other Tulsans onto the show today, so I need to bring them on because, of course, we want to hear from Tulsans. But thank you so much. We're going to talk more about this going forward, though, everybody. Pastor Williamson, Attorney Hoffler, and Dwight McKee and Dr. Malveaux, because we really, 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 really need to know. Really, really need to know. Okay?
Yes.
Well, thank you.
I'm sending you all much love. Thank you, thank you, thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Okay, great. Okay, and so you have the people we're going to be calling now. Okay. Okay, everybody. Okay. I think I need you to call CK back because I need the legal side of this. Let me get her. CK, would you mind coming back so you can give us a legal angle on this? Okay, he's gonna call you back, okay? All right, honey. Bye-bye. Paul? Okay. Okay. Just call everybody else. And please bring CK.
I have Bishop Pearson.
Okay, and bring CK back up.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Bishop Pearson, how are you?
I'm good this morning. Hope you're well.
I am doing well. It's wonderful hearing your voice.
You sound refreshing every time I hear yours. Always.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You got Tiffany and Nehemiah on, right?
I sure do. I didn't speak with them because
So Nehemiah just texted me. He's up and ready. Tiffany is circulating and ready too.
Okay, no worries. Thank you because I put them on the call list after I got that from you.
Good.
We have Reverend Turner.
To Stevie last night, he's real.
I'm sorry, Pastor.
I was able to speak to Stevie last night about something that's on his heart. I'll share it later, but he.
Okay. Well, you know what? It would be. I thought has anyone invited the Gap Band there?
No, well, they don't do much. But Charlie's from this city. Why they haven't invited him, I don't know yet.
Well, I mean, get Uncle Charlie. We love Uncle Charlie. He is real current.
He's incredible. I'm just surprised that he's not involved.
Well, no, y'all need to call him. See, I'm telling you, just make your own party. That's what I learned from Reverend Jackson. You know, when things start going off track, please, God always has some more steel.
Well, these folks are going to put millions into circus-like things and nothing for the survivors. So that's one of the reasons they backed off. Stevie.
And call Stevie and let's just have our own party. That's what I said. And I'm not from Tulsa, but you know, that's.
Well, I called Stevie. Stevie would come. He said, "I'm in. He don't want white people benefiting from people who are against us, who are not supporting, laws against lynching." He knew a lot of Republicans are on this committee, white, Trump supporters.
It's you know what, and you have Democrats you're not pushing back hard enough. I'm just
We have Mr. Frank.
Mr. Frank, how are you?
I'm well. How are you this morning? Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Bishop Pearson, for bringing him on. We're so excited to have you.
He's one of our brightest minds.
And I have of course, we got Pastor Robert Turner, and we just had your sister beloved, Julian Malvo, on. Are you up and about?
How's it doing? How you doing, Bishop?
I'm good this morning. I'm hanging tough and turf. We got to all do that.
Amen.
We have to hang tough.
Jonathan Jackson. He's answering now.
We have Ms. Crutcher.
Miss Crutcher, how are you? Santita Jackson here.
Hey, Santita Jackson. So good to hear your voice and to be here. I'm ready and excited to kick off the commemoration activities for the 100-year anniversary. So I'm already up and at it.
Well, I know you are. You're up and at it. Bless your heart.
Yeah.
I know where that goes. Bless your heart. You all are working very hard. We're very excited about coming in. We'll get in tomorrow night. Reverend Jackson, after his granddaughter, my niece, she graduates tomorrow. Do that first.
Awesome. Well, I'm honored to have Reverend Jackson here in Tulsa on ground again.
And we have Mr. Jackson.
Okay, and we've got Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push. He's also my brother. And we've got Bishop Carlton Pearson. We've got Reverend Robert Turner. And I'm so excited to have you, Nehemiah.
30 seconds.
Adam Show, the Black Wall Street Times. Stay right there, everybody. We're going to get right to it. Okay, everybody. We can hear everything going on in the background, so please make sure you have everything quiet, even shuffling papers. It's amplified on my end. Thank you so much.
You hear that, Bishop Pearson? Yes, sir. Yeah. I want you to stop making all.
And we have Attorney Hoffler, and we're starting right now.
Eating a donut. I know what that is.
Okay.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. Of course, we took over the airwaves for Air America, and we're growing every day thanks to you. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, my home to the north, and my morning stars over here on Facebook from all over the world, Puerto Rico, from Brazil, from the continent of Africa, and we just have you coming from all over and all over the United States, from the left coast to the east coast. We're so glad that you're with us. Please meet us over on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook, Santita Jackson and Friends, and I want you to please stay tuned to WCPT 820's Facebook page throughout the day. After I am finished, you will have Stephanie Miller, you will have Tom Hartman, you'll have Joni Esposito, and so many people in great programming throughout the weekend and throughout the week. You don't want to miss all of this wonderful information coming to you from the largest progressive talk radio station in the United States of America. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you on this Memorial Day weekend and on the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa massacre, of the Tulsa bombing. We're going to be talking about that today, giving you the real story. And the part of the real story today is, interestingly enough, as this would intersect with Memorial Day. Many of you do not know that Black people invented Memorial Day. Indeed, newly freed from slavery African Americans saw that white soldiers from the Union Army had been dumped in mass graves. And a lot of these soldiers, even Confederate soldiers, had been dumped in mass graves, but particularly the Union soldiers. And so they went into the graves, they pulled them out, and they buried them properly. And they gave them a funeral service. And they had a parade. They honored these men. They honored these men. So I want you to remember that, everybody. The origins of Memorial Day, excuse me, African Americans were paying homage to those who fought for freedom and liberty in the United States of America. Everybody, let's go to some of these headlines as we go to this magnificent panel who are going to be talking with us about Tulsa and what we can do about it today as people are seeking reparations. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 52 degrees, everybody, and rain. It's raining right now. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 63 degrees, partly cloudy. The Dow closed up 141 points. The NASDAQ closed down a point, and the S&P 500 closed up 4 points yesterday. The Bucks, well, they were triumphant over the Heat, 113 to 84. The Lakers, 109. The Suns, 95. And the Nuggets, 120. The Trailblazers in a heartbreaker, 115. The Royals will be playing the Twins today. The White Sox were triumphant over the Orioles, 5-1 yesterday. They'll be playing them once again today, the Orioles versus the Sox. And the Cubs will be playing the Reds today. Everybody, let's get right to it. Let's get right to it. Will we have reparations? Will we have reparations for the survivors of the Tulsa massacre? What happened in Tulsa? What happened in Tulsa? Let's tell the story, everybody. So much of that story has been hidden for 100 years, and now no more. It seems that the ancestors are crying out from the heavens for justice. Indeed, that is what Mrs. Viola Fletcher, 107 years of age, she said, I come to Congress, I come here seeking justice. She said, quote, I still see Black men being shot. black bodies lying in the street. I still smell smoke and see fire. I still see black businesses being burned. I still hear airplanes flying overhead. I hear the screams. I have lived through the massacre every day. Our country may forget this history, but I cannot. I come here seeking justice. Wow, everybody. Let's talk about this today. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers will give you the opportunity to text us here. And so I want to introduce this wonderful panel, and I'm going to hear from them. What happened with Tulsa, and where do we go from here? Of course, joining us from the last segment, I had to call her back. I said, she understands the legal side of this. The president of the National Bar Association, attorney C.K. Hoffley. She's also the chair of Rainbow Push. And we've got Bishop Carlton Pearson. Yes, that Bishop Carlton Pearson, the iconic one. He's with us today. He's done so much to really help us to pull this show together and to get us into Tulsa. We cannot wait to see you at the invitation we are going of this panel. Robert Turner, Reverend Robert Turner, the pastor of the historic Vernon AME Church in Tulsa. He has stood in the middle of the street with a megaphone, crying out for justice, and boy, oh boy, he has made some great things happen. And of course, Nehemiah Frank, the editor of the Black Wall Street Times. We can't say enough about this beautiful woman, Tiffany Crutcher. She's the sister of Terrence Crutcher. She has been holding up the bloodstained banner. He was murdered by the police in Tulsa. Can't wait to talk about that. And Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push. Let me start with you, Bishop Carlton Pearson. Tulsa, why is it significant today?
Well, probably one of the most, and it's always great to be with you, Santita. You're one of the brightest minds we have in country culture. I love you so dearly and respect you highly, highly. You represent human and civil rights royalty. Your dad's a prince and a king. And I mean that. I think everybody on this panel knows that you're valuable gem. Thanks for pulling us together today. The most dastardly orchestrated conspiracy of silence in American culture, or one of them, has occurred over 400 years and now is being unveiled. The whole world, all eyes are on Tulsa. The worst race massacre in American history occurred. Not even our own relatives, and I have many that migrated to the West Coast where I was born. They left here in 1921, 22, and came out in horse-drawn covered carriages to get out there, some of them. And they did not tell the story. They were so psychologically wounded. I've been in this city for 50 years and have heard little discussion, some, but I'd lived here. I went to school, living and pastoring here, and heard very little about it. Even the great preachers that I know who came from here, leaders of the Church of God in Christ, who never said a word. They preached Jesus, but they didn't say much about justice. So I'm reconsidering everything. And what's happening this week is historic, it's prophetic, it's powerful, and it's going to ultimately change the conditions of the consciousness and culture of our country. The people you have on this morning are on the ground. They've been in the trenches. They know what they're talking about. And I'm so honored that they're all here.
Oh, thank you so much for helping me to bring everybody together. It's really at your behest that they are here. And I thank you, Bishop Carlton Pearson, indeed one of the great spiritual leaders of our time and of all time. Reverend Robert Turner, you are doing what you reminded me of Reverend Vernon Johns. He was a bit of a different kind of guy. But people have no idea what he did to move the ball forward for all of us. In his little pastorate in Virginia, you stood with a megaphone, really crying out for justice for Tulsa. I mean, for the Tulsa massacre. I mean, you have wanted to put that really front of mind. And your church, the historic Vernon AME Church. There's something special about your basement. Tell us about that.
Yes, thank you again, Sister Santita, for inviting me, and it's always a pleasure to be in your midst and with Reverend Jesse Jackson, and we're so looking forward to having him come down in just a few days. I am, as you stated, the pastor of Historic Vernon African Methodist Episcopal Church, and our church started in 1905 right here in the Greenwood District, and We came to Greenwood Avenue in 1908, and we've been landowners ever since. And we built our basement there in 1914, and it was finished in 1919. And in the race master of 1921, when we were building our superstructure on top, and they destroyed it, our basement survived. And our basement is still here today in the same location. And during the massacre, people actually hid in our basement. And every week, as you stated, I go out to City Hall and I demand for justice. I've been doing this now for over 3 years. It's been my life's work. I really have been passionate about this issue because it is something that not just Tulsa, but America needs to understand that God still sits high and looks low, and that he's looking down on this city and on this nation that is yet to repair, repay, or atone for her oldest and original sin, which is that of racism.
Why did you stand in front of City Hall? I mean, what were you thinking?
I know. I get that question a lot. I was just being obedient. When God tells you to do something, and in my case, I don't do it always immediately, but I pray and meditate on it. And because I was made aware, when I came, and I already knew about the lawsuit that was filed back in 2003 by Johnny Cochran and Professor Ogletree and Al Brophy, and I knew that was unsuccessful, and I knew about the state legislature not approving any of the recommendations from the massacre, from the race riots and commission back in 2001. And so even though it failed in the courts in 2003 and it failed in the legislature, God said that his will still will be done. And so legally, at the time, we didn't have any recourse, and politically, we did not, but morally, we have still the high ground. And that is what happened in 1921 was the first time that bombs were dropped on American soil. That is that for the first time by air, we were assaulted. And those perpetrators have never been brought to justice. That is that in 18 hours, over 37 square blocks were destroyed and 300 people killed and bodies dumped in mass graves. And if that's wrong in 1921, and I believe it is, I believe it's abominable, it's still wrong in 2021. And we must speak up and do something about it. And so I wasn't waiting for a centennial. I wasn't waiting for any news cameras. I did it the first time by myself with the Bible in one hand and a bullhorn in the other. And I've been doing it ever since.
Tiffany Crutcher, you have turned your pain into power. Dr. Crutcher, your brother was killed in Tulsa. I don't think that people really understand the challenges that you still face in Tulsa. Talk to us. Why is this? Please go ahead. I mean, why is this anniversary? Why is this so significant? And please tell us about your brother first.
Well, again, thank you, Santita, for having me. It's definitely an honor to serve on this panel with people I consider icons. But yes, my twin brother was Terrence Crutcher, killed in 2016 right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the same community, a predominantly Black community, with his hands in the air. Unarmed police officers were looking for weapons, but they found gospel CDs. My father and my mother are Reverend Joey and the late Leanna Crutcher, who I would consider legends in this city, pillars in this community, individuals who served Tulsa, Oklahoma for decades, related to gospel music and serving North Tulsa, really all of Tulsa. And they didn't know who they killed that day. And they didn't know that Terrence Crutcher had a family who loved him, a community who loved him. Terrence loved gospel music, and you would find him in church every week. He was struggling with drug addiction. He had just started college 15 minutes before he was killed. Didn't realize that his class was canceled. Don't know what happened between that. The last people who saw Terrence were his professors. They gave him a big hug. 15 minutes later, he was dead and killed by a police officer in Tulsa. Fast forward, we went through a criminal trial for the first time in the history of Tulsa. A police officer was indicted, but she was acquitted on first-degree manslaughter charges. And that night, I made a declaration, a promise to my community, to the city of Tulsa, to the world, that I would not rest until we transformed policing, not just in this city, but across the country. So I started to take my fight to City Hall that following week. Every single week, I mobilized and galvanized people to be at City Hall, speaking out, crying out for policing reforms and policy changes, and to acknowledge what they did to my brother. Because it's not what you say, it's what you keep saying, right? I took my fight to the state capitol, and then I took my fight to the nation's capital, making these same requests and demands. And I'm going to tell you this, almost 5 years later, not one policy has changed that would prevent what happened to Terrence from happening to his 9-year-old son, Terrence Jr. What's so significant about what happened to Terrence and relating it to the 100-year anniversary or what happened 100 years ago? We're third-generation descendants of a survivor. My great-grandmother had to flee in fear of her life when this took place, and we never learned about it. A lot of the survivors, as Bishop Pearson talked about, was forced into silence. There was a conspiracy of silence. They were afraid to talk about it. And so I didn't learn about it until I went off to college. My dad didn't learn about it until he got back from Vietnam. And she whispered it when she finally said something. Martin Luther King was assassinated and riots were breaking out all over. And she whispered to my dad and said, something like that happened here. And my dad said, what are you talking about? And that's when he learned about it the first time. So the internalized grief, the trauma, and they're still right now. You talked about Mother Fletcher and her baby brother, Uncle Red and Mother Randall. I was there with them when they testified before Congress, when she went to D.C. for the first time and mustered up enough courage to start talking about it, because she never did. People would ask her about it all the time. But they were afraid. But she finally said, I want justice before I leave this earth. Uncle Red, who served this country abroad just to come back and be considered less than, he said, I still believe in America and I still have faith. And I would like justice before I leave this earth. I'll never forget that moment. And so I stand on the shoulders of American heroes and giants like your father, Jesse Jackson, realizing what they went through and how they never stopped fighting, how they have these medals of honor, which are their emotional scars, their physical scars. And who am I? I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I left my clinical practice to come back home because I felt that this fight needed me more. And so the same police culture that burnt down my grandmother's community, the city of Tulsa, and the law enforcement that sanctioned and deputized Klansmen to kill innocent Black men, it's the same culture that killed my twin brother. And so we're here not just putting on ceremonies or events, but there's a call to action. There's a purpose behind this weekend. Yeah. We don't want people just to come and listen to music or hear sermons. We want for people to rally cry with us and say, we deserve justice. We deserve repair. We deserve respect. We deserve restitution. And so we hope that people will come and put their feet on this sacred ground and realize that the ancestors are crying out through the soil, saying, remember me. Never forget.
Yes, 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 yes.
Nehemiah Frank, editor of the Black Wall Street Times. It's a lot to hear, everybody, because this is our collective story. But you've got to write it down, Mr. Frank. Nehemiah Frank. I hear the prophet coming through. We've got to tell the story. We've got to tell the story. We can't wait for other people to tell our story, Nehemiah Frank.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So what do people? Because so many people, this is still a new story for people. Nehemiah Frank. We still don't. We still don't know about this story. And I'm going to give you these last 2.5 minutes, and then Jonathan Jackson and CK, we're going to talk to you on the other side. But we still don't know the story. How do we get it out? I'm glad that Scott Pelley from 60 Minutes went down there. I'm glad they did that. But, we should be telling our story every day.
Right, absolutely. And there are no better people on this entire planet that are more positioned and equipped and resourced to tell the story of Black Wall Street, the massacre, and the 100 years of a slow massacre that continued after what happened in 1921. And that is the fact that absolutely what Dr. Tiffany Crutcher had mentioned, which is that we never got restitution. We never got repair. Last week we were in Washington, D.C. Dr. Tiffany Crutcher, other descendants, including 3 living survivors, testified before Congress. And they said that, out of the 100 years, out of the 107 years that they had been on this earth, that they had not received any form of justice and restitution, from the city of Tulsa or from, the government that allowed, this city, this mob to bomb and burn and loot our city. And out of 100 years, only one person had even been held in the trial. Like that just, that is baffling to me to think that it took 100 years just to get a woman, who shot a Black man, and she still got away with murder.
Wait a minute,
and we all saw it.
Stay right here, because they call it a mob. It was 10,000 people who descended.
It was a war.
What? That's not a mob.
Right. Thank you for
1
correcting the narrative there.
No,
right.
And it's not a riot. A riot is hand-to-hand combat. This was a massacre.
Absolutely.
The last minute belongs to you before we go to break.
Thank you. And so it's up to us to be able to tell the truth, because the
1 minute.
The victors are usually the ones that can control, the narrative and the message. And we can be the victors. And so that is what the Black Wall Street Times does. We tell the truth, as we see it, and we're able to, help the Dr. Tiffany Crutchers. We're able to help, the Greg Robinsons and the Tyrances, of the world. We're able to, help galvanize the crowd and even, alert the wider media to,
30.
what is really happening here in Tulsa. And so that is what I believe the Black Wall Street Times has been effective in doing here on the ground.
Everybody, let's talk about Tulsa on the Santita Jackson Show, 773-763 WCPT, 773-763-9278. We got a lot to unpack, and we're going to do it right here. We're going to tell our own story. And it's not just a Black story. It's the American story. And until we all embrace that, nobody will be safe until we're all safe. Nobody will be free until we're all free. Nobody will be well until we're all well. Nobody will be healed until we're all healed. More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. All right, everybody. This is a whole lot to hear. Thank you. I want to thank all of you for being here, because, and we're going to tell this story more than once, because I know that there's a campaign to have the prayer wall of racial reconciliation. We're going to talk about that, Pastor Turner, because people need to, we need to have that. But I want to know, when we come back, about a right of return, right? I mean, because I'm not hearing about that, but I'm gonna get your comments, Jonathan, and ask you very quickly, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, about reparations. But I want to know about the right of return. We're on Facebook Live right now. What about, is anyone trying to return, Dr. Crutcher, Mr. Frank, Reverend Turner, Bishop Pearson, anybody trying to go back home to the land that their family owned that was taken from them?
We have a lot of African Americans who are mixed with Native Americans who have been X'd out, as I think Dr. Crutcher referred to earlier. And some are trying. I had relatives in town this week trying to reclaim property. White people who are mixed with Native American blood have access much easier than Africans. That's an old, cheap story. And a lot of people want. I have family who moved to California 100 years ago want to come home because the cost of living is better. But there is a psychological PTSD that has occurred. That we're traumatized, and when they think of that group, thinks of Tulsa, they're stunned. And now it looks like, even with these recent events, that they're still playing games with us. Comments that are made by Oklahoma legislators. From our governor on to our mayor. It's very embarrassing, really very frustrating that these people still have a voice and a choice. And so on the ground here locally, we're having to be more Protestant or protest a whole lot more than we ever have. We are now awakening to the dastardly deeds and are becoming much more vocal. It demonstrative. Reverend Turner has impressed me just because he just stayed on the wall. I mean, by himself with his bullhorn. And he stirred up a lot. Dr. Crutcher came in and just took the bull by the horn and shook us. Not only the police forces and law institutions, but people of color. She made us get involved. These younger people have some energy and some ambition. Nehemiah's writing it. He's thinking. He's got a brain that captures. And of course, your brother Jonathan, we can listen to him do the history from
1 minute.
He's just a genius. So I think the collective energy, we've got to pull together and work together, meet together repeatedly, talk and strategize. We cannot go off in 100 different directions and never talk. The wine is in the cluster, not the grape. We got to pull together, and we got to make this wine and save the best to the last.
Well, amen to that. Now, what a sermon, Dr. Crutcher. I love it.
30.
And I have to tell you, taking your pain and turning it into power, Dr. Crutcher.
Yes, I want to add to Bishop. You asked, are people coming 15. Back? I will say this weekend.
We can do it on the other side because I'm about to come up. I want you to come on and talk about that. Then Jonathan and attorney Hoflau. Stay right there.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Yes, we are victorious. We celebrate our ancestors today, the survivors, the thrivers, the strivers. We think of you today, Tulsa, because this is our American story. And we want to thank you, Bishop Carlton Pearson and Reverend Robert Turner, pastor of the historic Vernon AME Church in Tulsa, and Nehemiah Frank, editor of the Black Wall Street Times. You're making us think of our beloved Mark Allen here in Chicago, who did so much to amplify the Black Wall Street in Tulsa and all around the country. May he rest in power and peace, Dr. Tiffany Crutcher. Before we come to you, Jonathan Jackson, and you, Attorney Hoffler, I did ask a question, Dr. Crutcher, about the right of return. I mean, that's like a real issue for people. Is anyone talking about that? Because this land was essentially stolen from the ancestors. Dr. Crutcher?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad you asked that question. And, you know, it's hard to return back home when we don't have anything. If you look at the interstate that destroyed the historic Greenwood community, yet again, after
so many rebuilt. Many didn't, but some were lucky and did, because 10,000 people were displaced all over this country, and they had to flee, not as immigrants, but as refugees. But they rebuilt. The resiliency of our ancestors were just amazing. But then here comes this highway, and we all know about this all across the country, but urban renewal destroyed it, and then gentrification started to happen, and it's continuing to happen, the continued harm. And so when you come to Tulsa right now, you see the north side of that highway where Vernon AME sits and the North Tulsa community, and then you see the south side of the highway. And if you just look, you will see high rises, condos, rooftops, restaurants, businesses. Yep. And our beloved community has shrunk and been reduced to one block. And when people come, they're like, oh, this is it?
This is all that's to it?
Yeah. This is all that's to it. And we don't own anything. Black people own nothing. But what you'll hear is we're going to be talking about economic development and economic empowerment. For who? For who? Tell me how that money being made by people who don't look like you and I are trickling back into the Black community to build it up. And then as you go north, you see gentrification, you see eminent domain and blight, and our people are being pushed farther north or wherever they can get to. And so we're not the beneficiaries of anything. But this weekend, I can't re-emphasize enough, I'm calling it homecoming. People are coming home, people are waking up, and people are seeing what's happening, and we're demanding, and we're not going to let the tactics, and Bishop is right, I force people to get involved, because we have to really operate and flow in the facts. We're either going to do this right or we're going to do it wrong. We're either going to stand on the right side of history or we're going to coddle white supremacy. And I drew a line in the sand, Santita, to be on the right side and continue to stand for what's right. But we're coming home, and so we have a Survivors and Descendants Luncheon this Saturday at noon to honor the descendants of Dr. A.C. Jackson, who was a world-renowned surgeon in 1921. The descendants of J.B. Strapp. So many people are coming home and saying, we want to remember, we want to reclaim, and we want reparations. And so I'm excited to honor Representative Sheila Jackson Lee will be the keynote speaker. We have Senator Elizabeth Warren. We have Ryan Stevenson, the Oklahoma City Thunder. We have so many people who will be in the place, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Equal Justice Initiative, Human Rights Watch. So many people will be coming to help us honor, and there's a call to action.
That's right, and I want the land back. Jonathan Jackson, your thoughts? Because we will all be going to Tulsa this weekend. Jonathan?
You know, Santita, when I think of Tulsa, I think of Art Deco. That is architectural style that comes out of the 1920s of great craftsmanship and cutting-edge style and design. But to Bishop Turner's point, and the AME Church, where the basement still survives, that beautiful architecture above Tulsa that you see now gracing the skyline is on a rotten foundation. And the basement of the AME Church still remains to remind us. And I hope that we take advantage and not forget. It is sinful to forget. And what has happened in Tulsa is a form of molestation. This is so intimate, it's so American, it's so much within our own history, and it brings the past and the present and the future together, this painful incident. And I thank God for having spared Mother Viola Fletcher, because who would have thought that a person at 107 years of age would have a lucid mind and a strong tongue, and the woman can still travel, because the truth cannot be denied or destroyed. And so we are going to Tulsa because an injustice was created in Tulsa. It was never corrected in Tulsa. And the sin on the sin is a denial and the lying on top of it. The current governor is sinful in writing House Resolution 1775, I believe that is, to not teach the future generations the truth. We should demand, I don't want to use necessarily the term reparations because people can get confused by that, although that is something that we need. The insurance claims were never paid for. Those insurance claims can still be active. They denied American homeowners and landowners their rightful insurance claims. Reparations is a big word, of course, is needed, but the insurance claims that were denied in the city hall, the American bombs that were dropped on an American city. This is an American problem, and it's shameful and disgraceful. And now that we look 100 years later, through Democratic presidents of our choice, through senators of our choice, through congressional people of our choice, heads of committees of our choice, how many people have turned a willful eye and wanted to be willfully blind to deny the truth? And they've heard Ms. Fletcher. So the question becomes, how long do we have to wait? It's something everyone knows about. It happened on American soil, and a survivor still is alive. So it's not history. This is a current case that we should be fighting for.
Yes, Bishop Pearson, were you about to say something?
No, I just said, wow, that's
well, it is a lot. I mean, can someone paint the picture? Mr. Frank, what happened May 31st through June 1st? I want us to paint the picture because we keep calling it a white mob, and it was about 10,000 people. It was a bombing. It was a massacre. It was not a fist fight. These people came in to destroy, to kill and destroy, and they did it.
Right, absolutely. And so the day before May 31st, there was a young shoe shiner. His name was Dick Rowland. Dick Rowland was 19 years old at the time that he encountered Sarah Page, who was 17 years old, white female, on the south side of the tracks in an elevator. And so this is downtown Tulsa, 1921. The Red Summer had just happened 2 years prior to the 1921 Tulsa race war, and which became a massacre. And so, there are multiple stories around Dick Rowland and Sarah Page. One of the stories is that, the elevator didn't line up with the floor and that he tripped and accidentally grabbed the arm of Sarah Page and she screamed. And then, so, being a young black man during that time, when a white woman screams or cries, everybody that's black is in danger. And so he went running out of the elevator, ran about 8 blocks all the way back across the Frisco Railroad tracks into Deep Greenwood. And, Sarah Page, she never pressed charges, but somehow the yellow journalism, of the time, the continued negative stigma of black men, seemingly being thirsty for white women became this headline of nabbed Negro for assaulting white female on an elevator. And so the Tulsa Tribune prints this, to their large media base, their large followers here in Tulsa. And so the police, they end up capturing or detaining this young black man. They actually end up putting him in the courthouse because they were afraid that if they left him in the jail, that the smaller white mob would have broken in and lynched him. They were thirsty for lynching. There hadn't been a lynching, in Tulsa for a while. And so, that was, their call to action to protect this white woman and the rest of the white women right in Tulsa. And so they ended up taking this young man to the courthouse, putting him on the top floor. The white mob moved over to this courthouse and demanded that they release this young black man who was innocent, down to them so they could lynch him. And so the court did not release him. The sheriff that was guarding him did not release him. And so, that crowd began to get bigger. Somehow, word got caught in Greenwood that, this young man was going to be lynched, Dick Rowland. And, there were people going from door to door, from shop to shop, letting everyone know they're trying to lynch, one of our own in our community. And so some of the black men had traveled into, across the railroad tracks to go protect Roland. And a gun was shot, and then, as one of the white man, I believe it was one of the police, they ended up saying, they were quoted saying, all hell broke loose after that. And so, you think about this smaller mob crowd. It wasn't them just going back to Greenwood. When the mob came to Greenwood, Dick Rowland wasn't even, he was probably still at the courthouse at the time. It was bigger. It was more than just an elevator situation. It was about eliminating the prosperity, the economic power, the possible voting power that could come from these black people who just in 56 years, after emancipation, just a generation and a half after being enslaved, built the wealthiest black community in the African diaspora. They were a threat to the white establishment, and they needed to be eliminated. And that is the reason why they destroyed Black Wall Street.
Well, why is black progress a threat to the rest of America? I mean, Pastor Turner, Bishop Pearson, Dr. Crutcher, Jonathan Jackson. Let me start with you, Pastor Turner. I mean, we can all win, can't we? Together? Pastor Turner? Well, we might have lost him. Bishop Pearson, why is it that black progress appears to be a threat to...
Well, it's not as much a threat as it is when whites aren't progressing. What was happening, this is right after World War One. Tulsa earned a lot of money. Oklahoma was doing all right during the war, but it stopped. So their businesses were going down. Their people were broke. The white poor people who fought in the war were angry, but Black Wall Street seemed to be merging and growing and expanding, and they were jitterbugging and having fun and drinking and going to church and theater and thriving. And South Tulsa, where downtown, the white rich people were losing money, and they were observing with jealousy and anguish the success and happiness of people of color, singing and dancing and worshiping. And they planned this. They were looking for an opportunity to take us down. We've been thriving, but we kept thriving after the war and even began to thrive more. There were black people with private jets that owned oil property that were building and growing and expanding 40 blocks. And we were looking, feeling, and sounding better than Tulsa, South Tulsa, downtown Tulsa, which was just a walking distance from Greenwood. So that jealousy had been there. They had kept the black person down in this country for hundreds of years. And all of a sudden here in Tulsa, Native Americans and African Americans were growing and expanding. And the white racist people could not stomach it. They could not handle it. They said, we got to stop these niggas. We got to stop them. And that was a plan. They're still trying to stop us in their thinking with what's happening now in our government and our Congress, with the Republican Party fighting everything that shows growth. They're afraid of becoming minorities. And they're psychologically having a public nervous breakdown because people of color, whether they're Arabs or Hispanics or Asians, are taken over with when it comes to numbers and voting power and economic power. The white man's losing control, losing his grip on the country and the culture and eventually the Congress. They're freaking out, if I can use that terminology. And so they don't just hate us succeeding, they hate losing more than hate us succeeding.
Well, and yet, we are looking to revive that community. I mean, and indeed, you, Pastor Turner, are doing something I think that's so needed. The prayer wall of racial reconciliation. Can you explain that, Pastor Turner?
Yes. This is Santita. We at Vernon in the church, our basement that I was telling you about the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, the exterior wall of it
We are dedicating on Monday at 10 o'clock to become a prayer wall for racial healing. And outside of Jerusalem, it'll be one of the few public prayer walls in the world and the only one of its kind just for racial healing. And at that dedication, I'm so thankful to be able to share that the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. Will be offering the dedicatory prayer and giving some remarks. And I hope that it can be a place, as the Wailing Wall is in Jerusalem. I hope and pray that it can be a place where people of all faiths and all backgrounds can come, pray in whatever way they see fit to their Creator, to God, and to ask for help and to ask for the strength to go out into this world and be change agents for racial healing, and be change agents for truth, and change agents for justice.
Reverend Dr. Turner, what is your website? Because we want to get involved, because this does not come free and we need to pay for it ourselves. How can we be of support?
Amen. VernonAME.com. That's VERNON.com. And it has all the information there that you would need to know. And we would appreciate any and all support, because this is not something just for Vernon. It's really for the world.
Well, we pay a lot of money for a lot less. I got about a minute to give to you, Attorney Hoffler. I mean, because you handle these cases. You've been Willie Gary's lawyer. You've worked with Professor Ogletree. I mean, you are a brilliant legal mind. In about a minute and a half, where do we go from here with reparations? Where do we go from here?
Well, Santita and panel, where we go is we have to keep fighting the legal fight as well. As I indicated earlier and has been spoken on in this past hour, the previous legal challenges have not been successful, but that's been the case on many cases that are ultimately successful. Initially, the first challenges may or may not be successful. So it doesn't mean that we stop the fight. It means that we continue the fight. We learn from the court's decisions. We recognize and look at the appropriate time to bring the claims again. And the reason for that is because you have to look at who's on the bench when you're bringing federal claims. And that's why it's critically important. And it was devastating to many of us in the bar when the past administration appointed close to 300 federal judges and the like who were very, very conservative, because these are the judges that will sit on these cases. But nonetheless, it's important to continue to fight these legal battles. And there, is a team assembled. We did have a town hall meeting about a month ago, the National Bar did, including that region, where the lawyers did a presentation that was quite compelling. So the legal component, there needs to be continuous fighting in the court. That's number one. But that's got to be accompanied by the sustained and robust actions, as many on this call, in the community, asking for justice, asking for reparations. Thirdly, when you have a mayor and a governor that make the kind of statements that have been made, and I was privy to some of those because the presentation that was done by some of our members that are there on the spot, you've got to do something. Don't continue to elect people who are not advocating your interests. Don't continue to elect people who are talking nonsense about what happened, acting as though, there was some little fight that happened between some people. So I think that it's important to do that, to fight on multiple levels and make sure that you get outside attention. They have people from the outside putting pressure on Oklahoma, including global pressure. And I think with the attention that the 100th anniversary will have, maybe global pressure can be brought, just as there's global pressure and attention brought to George Floyd's murder. So those would be the things that we need to do. Absolutely. And that will help the legal fight.
And it is a legal fight, everybody. And I want you to stay with me just for a few minutes on Facebook Live, because I'm going to get some closing thoughts from this magnificent panel. But I want to go to you just very quickly, Dr. Tiffany Crutcher. You've turned your pain into power. The murder of your brother. You have decided to empower everybody else. In about a minute, I need a closing thought from you. What should I say? A thought that will prepare us forward, because you're going to be back on this show. You got to come back.
Thank you so much. Well, I will say this. Also, a few weeks before I went to the Capitol to meet with the survivors, I was there with the family of George Floyd, Eric Garner, and Botham Jean, meeting with our U.S. congressmen and women to push the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act across the finish line. I met with Senator Tim Scott. I met with Senator Lindsey Graham. I met with Majority Leader Senator Chuck Schumer. I met with Representative Sheila Jackson Lee and Representative Karen Bass. And we think we're at the precipice of some real change and reform. And I believe that George Floyd's death was the turning point. It wasn't the first death because we know we saw what happened to Terrence Crutcher and Breonna Taylor and so many more. But I believe that eyes were opened and attitudes shifted. And so right now we're going back and forth on qualified immunity. And so if you can reach out to your elected officials and say, we need qualified immunity repealed. We need to change the threshold that allows police officers to say, I fear for my life because they thought a black man was reaching for something. We need those components changed to really get accountability and justice. And so that's kind of where I am right now, and we're going to keep pushing.
This is about justice. How can we support you, Nehemiah Frank, very quickly with the Black Wall Street Times? How can we be supportive?
Yeah, so support Black media nationally. Support your local Black media. The Black Wall Street Times. We are expanding nationally. We have a new magazine that just came out. It is available for purchase. It's $20 for that magazine, and it is pretty much our 1619 to 1921 to 2021 project, and so. You can support us by purchasing that magazine.
And how can we get it?
Yes, it is online at theblackwallstreettimes.com.
All right, everybody. And your website, Reverend Dr. Robert Turner, can't wait to be with all of you. Everyone wants to know the website.
VernonAME.com, VERNON.com. I hope as many people that can tune in or come will as well.
Jonathan, 30 seconds belong to you.
Santita, this is I apologize. This is molestation, and the word is awful, but you have to call it
1 minute.
It's the truth, and we need to heal the American family, but you have to take the glass out of the womb. We have to be able to speak truthfully about our history so we can go forward. God bless the survivors and the descendants that fight on for justice.
Everybody, stay with me on Facebook Live, but the last 30 seconds, I'd love for you to bless us, Pastor Pearson. Bishop Pearson, please.
The word molestation comes from the name of the animal, a mole, which is a nocturnal thing. There's a lot of things done in darkness that continue to be done in darkness that keeps people under depressed in our country. Let's pray and believe and bring and be the light that exposes the darkness, chases it away, so the molestation stops. We're dealing with spiritual wickedness in high and
10
places. That's where the molestation occurs. We can change that by doing exactly what you're doing, Santita. Talking about it, pulling us together, making us speak out loud. Millions of people are listening, and we're going to see change, powerful change in our lifetime.
Shine a light, shine a light. Going to get some closing thoughts from everybody on the other side on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. God bless you, everybody. Have a safe and wonderful Memorial Day weekend. And remember the Black origins of it. It was about honoring everybody, about seeking justice. And you know what? When we have justice, we will truly have peace. I love you, everybody. God bless you. Happy Memorial Day.
Thank you. Love you all.
Can you all give me a few more words before we get off the phone here? Jonathan, are you out and about? Dr. Crutcher? I know I thought you were kind of like this. I'm sorry. No.
That's okay. I just want to say my dad wanted me to give a shout out to Jonathan Jackson. He said, that's my boy. So from Reverend Joe Crutcher.
He'll be here this weekend.
Dr. Crutcher, I'm going to give him your number. He's going to be down there. We're all coming in
Please
tomorrow.
do.
I
Please do.
keep
Please.
telling Jonathan he's missing his calling because all these preachers always give him a shout out. I love it.
All right.
But I want to
No,
get some,
we'll do something about it.
I want to get some closing thoughts from everybody. We're still on Facebook and we still have a lot of people who are listening in. Is there anything that's been left unsaid? Of course, there's so much that we can talk about. We're going to continue to go forward. VernonAME.com, everybody. We need to build our own prayer wall of reconciliation. We don't need a government loan. We don't need a loan from a bank. We don't need any of that. You need to prioritize this because that which we love, we pay for. And let us do that. Let us love ourselves and our own first. So, closing thoughts from everybody. Let me start with you, Nehemiah Frank. I think of the prophet Nehemiah. I love your name. I love it. Nehemiah Frank. How can we help just nationally, all this great diaspora that we've got?
I would say call a city of Tulsa and tell them that they owe reparations, that they owe, we deserve monetary compensation for the losses of what happened. Reconciliation does not come in the form of, museums. It doesn't come in the form of, rhetoric. It doesn't come in the form of, material places. It comes in the form of restitution, monetary restitution for the economic losses that took place from, for the 56 years that we had to actually make something of ourselves in this country, to have it ripped from us. That impacts us from generation to generation to generation. So, that is what we need. We need federal legislation. I hope that people can contact their local, their state Congress people, and their federal Congress people to say, we need HR 40 passed in this country.
Well, you know what?
Those are my final thoughts.
Well, I want you to come back when I get back because I'm going to be coming to Tulsa. It'll be there for a few days. When you come back, we need to talk about HR 40, is it? House Resolution 40? And then how we can get it through the U.S. Senate. Because, I think that we have to develop our own sense of entitlement and have it fortified. We're the ones who have to do it. Mm-hmm. We're the ones. We're the ones who have to do it. Let me go around. Pastor, Reverend Dr. Robert Turner with the megaphone. We thank God for you and being that in that Vernon Johns tradition. Just kind of looking, you were not afraid to look odd even as you were being obedient to God. Your final thought.
No, I just want to encourage your listening audience to go forth and to continue to fight and show my gratitude for the work that your father and the whole family has done throughout the years. And knowing that in this battle that we wage, it is not ours. It belongs to God. I can't encourage them enough to realize the moment that we are in right now, not just in America, but in the world, that this is a global struggle for human rights, a global struggle for justice, and we must do our part as members of this country, citizens of this nation, to petition, to march, to protest for our true freedom, which comes not just by your birth or citizenship, but comes when you actually have the full use of rights as citizens and the full use of opportunity and access as citizens. So I commend them for tuning in to you. I think you have one of the best shows in America, and I'm thankful to be on.
Oh, I've just taken your words and the words of Bishop Pearson to heart. That means so much. It gets me up at 2 a.m. so I can get this done. Well, because this is a service and we're so blessed. I'm blessed to have this platform, and I'm grateful to WCPT and AM 950 Radio and these other stations that are coming on for providing this platform because we need to have the truth. It's going to make us. It's going to make us right. It's going to make us well. Jonathan, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, your thoughts.
This is something that happened on American soil. I have to go back to just one point. By fellow citizens with the support of the United States government. It's something that was well known, and the violence that took place on top of the violence is the erasure of the history, the denying of the claims, the refusing to teach. And so it makes a person have a distorted personality because they've been wronged by their, if you will, their mother and their father, all the people that are the caretakers of the land. This is so much of the Black pain that's right here. And this is why people come from around the country, around the world, and settle in our community. They too are taking part in the molestation of us, of being able to take advantage of our pain. Sure, they have a clean slate and they can look forward and they can see opportunity. But we were denied and robbed in broad daylight. So thank God for the working of the Lord. And we have to remember George Floyd. Through his blood painting this canvas, now we can see the picture of Tulsa so much clearer. A year ago, people wouldn't have believed this could be possible, but now we can see the horrors of our history. And this is a current case. I want to go back to that. And I'm going down to Tulsa because it's shut up in my bones. I've got to be there because our ancestors were wronged. The history is made clear, and we're going to get to the truth in God's name.
In God's name. Bishop Carlton Pearson, we leave it to you.
Thank you, Precious. The success of the Black Wall Street in Tulsa is not just geographical. There's a vortex of energy in this country of survivalists who have arrived and thrived. Black people, male and female, across the country. The history is full of them who are scientists and successful. We still have a lot of millionaires, billionaires, corporate executives, entrepreneurs, and I'm inviting them to come to Tulsa to join with business people locally, and let's build our own Wall Street. We'll be waiting a long time for reparations. I think at some point they'll come, but let's use what we have pulled together. We will host webinars and seminars here, and conferences, so business people can come to Tulsa. I'm talking to some of the billionaires in our country now about coming here. Stevie Wonder called last night. He said, "Man, I've got a plan to help build Greenwood back." A fun effort that he wants to talk to me about later on this morning. We're going to ask people like that, celebrities, pull together. Let them wait for the white man or even the government. They'll drag it out and use red tape from now on. Let's use our own minds and our own money. Come to Tulsa, make it happen, and start immediately.
Because we need to do it ourselves. Jonathan, Bishop Pearson.
We did it first. We did it the first time ourselves. We'll have to do it again ourselves.
We have to take
There were white people. Let me say this funny thing. I think there were white people on the committee who were conservatives, who had no interest in the centennial. They shouldn't have been on the committee in the first place. They stole money or used things. I just have to tell you that in the soul, something's not right about these people. It's like putting the fox in the hen house to guard it. We don't need ultra-conservative white legislators or anybody else being a part of this kind of a thing, because I don't trust their energy. I don't trust their spirit. That same violent, vicious mob energy that occurred 100 years ago has recently occurred. It occurred in Washington, January 6th. That spirit is still present in this earth. So we can't wait for them or wait on them. We got to do it ourselves.
Dr. Crutcher?
Man, this is a whole nother conversation. Yeah. Bishop just opened up a can of worms, but I won't even go there this morning because people are touching down right now. We're getting ready to head down to the historic Greenwood and kick off, led by a processional, led by the 3 last known living survivors. They'll be in horse and carriage. The African Ancestral Society will be drumming. The community will be marching, and we're going to go down our street, whose streets, our streets, and we're going to honor them. And so I'm excited. And I will just say this, I didn't get a chance to share some of the other efforts, but we will be building the city's first comprehensive memorial dedicated to the hundreds of African American lives that were lost at the hands of racial terror violence.
We have the Oklahoma City bombing memorial, justifiably so. The New York City bombing memorial, justifiably so. There was a victims' compensation fund for those victims and those survivors, but we have yet to truly honor and give our ancestors a proper burial or memorial. And I'm helping to lead that effort. There's an effort to excavate remains and mass graves. We're hoping that we'll be able to bring our ancestors back home where they belong. And so there's a website, blackwallstreetmemorial.com. blackwallstreetmemorial.com. The pandemic slowed us down. Some other issues slowed us down, but we will persist. We will build this memorial. We feel that it's sinful in our faith for us not to have a proper committal or a burial. And so we're doing that right now in partnership with Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative. We're going to the very sites that these victims were massacred, and we're collecting soil. And right now we have several of those jars on display in the Gilcrease Museum. It opens today. So when you come to Tulsa, go to the Gilcrease Museum and see. It's called The Legacy of Survival. And you'll see another story file or interactive story file exhibit where you can actually talk to the survivors long after they're gone through augmented reality. And so when you all touch down, get to the Gilcrease Museum, honor these names, say their names, and I'm just really honored to participate in this remembrance work. But that's the blackwallstreetmemorial.com, and I'm excited to be a part of this work.
Well, I thank you for your powerful witness, and I just thank you, and I cannot wait to have you back on the show to talk about what you're doing down there. And so, because we need to, the only way I think that we can really move this forward is to continue to talk about it. This is a drum that we have to beat. I mean, Dr. Crutcher, we've got to beat it all the time. We have to raise money for the Black Wall Street Memorial. We have to raise money for Vernon AME. We need a prayer wall. We need that. And what's exciting to me, Black people, we had so much pain. Jonathan, our grandma Helen, our paternal grandmother, Jonathan, I think I've shared with you years ago. I was so excited. After Roots, we were all excited, right? Those of us who are old enough to remember it. We were kids when it came out, but it was the biggest show in history. And it was so impactful though that they've not put it, ABC never saw fit to re-air it. Okay. But we were blessed with getting advanced copies of Roots 2. We got like the first 3 or 4 episodes because it was exciting. They didn't send us all 7, but they gave us a chunk of them. And I was so excited. I was out in California. My grandmother was out there. Our grandfather just passed away. And I said, oh, I'm so excited. We got Roots 2, and couldn't get any further. My grandmother stopped me in my tracks. She said, do not ever mention Roots to me. She said, do you think I want to talk about that? Do you know why we look the way we do? Do you think I want to bring that back up? She said, don't you ever. And I said, wow. Had she lived, she would be about 95 now. It's a lot of pain. It's a lot of pain in our experience. And she was very proud of Dad's work, of her son's work. But the pain in our experience, we're going through that now, and we're talking about Tulsa. We're now honoring, we now want to know, are you a descendant of slaves? That's not to exclude or hurt anybody else, but we're honoring them now. We're not ignoring them. We're not saying we're better than that. We're not, I think we're beginning to grow past, if I were back then, no, if you were back then, I would hope you would have the courage of our ancestors and face these enemies who, in all likelihood, would kill you. Remember, lynching was an after church activity, everybody. It was picnic. Yeah. It was good times. So I think this is a very, very exciting moment. It's pregnant with hope, and I certainly don't want to be the last one to say anything here. I will yield to you, Dr. Crutcher, and to you, Mr. Frank, and to you, Pastor Turner. And I'm just going to go around and just really get one final word from everybody. And first, starting with you, as you give us a final word, Nehemiah Frank. Again, how can we support the Black Wall Street Times? Oh, I think he's already gone. Dr. Crutcher, How can we support you? Oh.
Well, yes. Okay.
Oh, you're there, girl. Go on. This is live. You know, you got to roll with it. It's okay.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, well, I started the Terrence Crutcher Foundation in my brother's name. We've been doing, I would say, some impactful work here in Tulsa, and that's TerrenceCrutcherFoundation.org, TerrenceCrutcherFoundation.org, TERENCE. And again, support the building of this memorial. We've been on a campaign. We're going to launch again in a very powerful way. That's blackwallstreetmemorial.com. And tonight we are excited to have in our presence legendary gospel artist John P. Key gracing us as the headliner tonight. So we're excited. And then on tomorrow night, T.J. Morton, Bishop Morton's son, he'll be the headliner. Yeah, and so and then on Sunday we'll have our homecoming event, our main event, what we call our reparations rally. Wes Lowry, Alfre Woodard, Jay Ellis, Brittany Packnett Cunningham, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. So many people will grace us and honor and step foot on this soil, and most importantly, the community will show up. We will elevate and center the community, the survivors and descendants. They are the most important individuals because when all of the cameras go away, when the last song is sung, when the last word is spoken, the people on this phone call are going to still be here fighting and screaming with your help, because people were displaced across the country. And so Black Wall Street is a spirit. You know, it's a mindset, and we have to understand that. And Black Wall Street is in all of us. We come from greatness, and so we're going to need you all keeping this message alive all over this country, because Tulsa is simply the microcosm of what's happening all across this country. And so, again, we welcome you all to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Get here because we're going to keep sharing this story until we can't share it anymore. So get here when you can. Thank you so much for this platform. I love you all. I love your family. Bishop Pearson, you know I love you. Thank you for standing with us from day one. You've been there from day one, and I can't thank you enough.
Love you, precious.
We love you. We love you. We love you and admire you for your courage. And we just thank you for being available to God so that you could be used in this mighty, mighty way. Does anyone else have anything they want to say, Jonathan? I know we're heading down to Tulsa. And, Bishop Pearson, if you could just lead us out prayerfully. We need that. A lot of people are going to be traveling. We want people to have the traveling grace, traveling mercies. And a lot of people, now that they've heard about this, their hearts are with Tulsa. And if you could just give us a word in these turbulent times, as Pastor Darius Brooks said, there is a mess. There's a message in the message.
Yeah.
So I wish you'd give us a word before, just so that we can
and there was a massage. There's also a massage with the mess and the message. I pray a divine massage of our consciousness, of our spirits, that the power of the Holy Spirit would quicken our energies, our positive reinforcements across this country, across this culture, and affect the consciousness of the nation. I pray for the Jackson family, the entourage coming to Tulsa, and the thousands who are moving this direction, whose eyes and hearts are toward our city, that there will be peace and resolution, ultimate resolution, that you'll give us not to just be victims of circumstances, but victors over circumstances. That's the way we believe. That's the way that we receive our blessing. We decree it in the name and nature of our Christ forever and ever. And so it is. Amen.
Amen. God bless you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for such a special, special moment in my life. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you, Bishop Pearson. I love you, Dr. Crutcher. I love you, Nehemiah Frank. I love you, Reverend Dr. Robert Turner and Jonathan Jackson. My brother, I love you. God bless you, everybody. And Attorney C.K. Hoffler, I love you. I love you. I love you. Thank you, Paul, for a great show. God bless you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Be blessed.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.